One of the most common questions that I receive is, how is it that I'm able to do a drawing, skipping the pencil, jumping straight to the brush? It's not as hard as it looks. It's not easy as well. There are ways to approach it, like everything. And there are also a few things to consider if you want to start doing that more reliably. And in this part of the course, I'll try to teach a couple of tips and tricks on how is it that you can do a drawing, skipping the pencil sketch and jumping straight to the brush. My first tip, so tip number one, I'm hoping the camera is focusing correctly. Yes, it is. My first tip number one is actually don't skip the pencil. Don't skip the pencil. Pencil sketch. The pencil sketch, I feel it's still very important in order to bring structure to your drawing. I find it that even though my drawings where I draw skipping the pencil, it is a cool technique, I do feel that my drawings benefit greatly from having a under sketch below. It brings a bit more structure, it brings a bit more thought into it. And sometimes when I'm in the middle of a drawing without a sketch, I'm thinking, okay, where do I go next? What is it that I should do next? How to make the drawing more interesting, right? What should I add further? While if I have a pencil sketch, usually the whole structure of the drawing is already taken care of. I have a rough idea of where is it that I go. And then with the brush, I'm essentially bringing the drawing to life and I'm adding the details, the flourishes, everything that makes the drawing pop. So my recommendation really is don't skip the pencil sketch unless you are, like myself, in need of time. You don't have necessarily a whole lot of time to consider perhaps a pencil sketch. You are in a pinch. Maybe you are even traveling and you only have a brush, you don't have a whole lot of time and you just want to get something done. So I think that's when drawing without a pencil really shines, it's in those the moments where you don't have necessarily much else to do, you don't have a pencil, you have a bit of a free time, or when you don't want to bother yourself with the pencil sketch, you want to jump straight to the action. But I really feel that a piece benefits from having a pencil sketch before. Or if not a pencil sketch, maybe a thumbnail, right? A thumbnail actually works. Thumbnail. A thumbnail can be something as simple as, and we can elaborate on this, a thumbnail can be something as simple as, maybe a drawing, you have a table here, you have some people, it can be something as simple as this, something to help you understand where you're going. And then you do your drawing without the pencil sketch, but you have a rough idea of what is it that you're going, what is it that you want to do, right? So that would be my number one tip. Don't skip the pencil sketch. My second tip, right? My second tip is find, and this falls back into something that I had shared in the previous lesson. Find the pen or the brush or the brush that works for you. And by this one I mean find the pen, or I mean it should be self-explanatory, but find the pen or the brush that you find the most comfortable holding on, drawing with. It's a bit of an extension of your hand. It just works for you. I can give you an example, right? Like I said before, the Pentel brush works very nicely for me for the purposes of doing the drawing without a pencil sketch. And the reason is that the brush itself, not to turn this into a Pentel sponsored video, which is not, but the pen itself, it has a nice degree of line variation. So you can go from super thin to super thick. And also something that, it's even easier to see with a black pen, there's a bit of a gradation to the ink, right? It might be hard to see with the camera, but it's not necessarily, when you go for a thin stroke or the ink itself, it's not always a super deep black, a super thick black. It has a bit of a gradation. It goes from black to gray, not white, but black to gray. So there's a nice gradation that just works nicely. So one thing, and I'll elaborate a bit further, is that you could do something like this where because you just have so much control of the brush, it might be super hard to see. Let me try to zoom in. So I'm drawing here. Let me put the camera. So here, right? Because you have such a control of the brush, you can do these super thin lines, right? That almost act as the undersketch, as the pencil sketch. And you can use it when building your drawing. So super thin lines here, right? And then, okay, I finally have, essentially what is a pencil sketch, even though it's made with ink. The lines are thin, they're hard to see. And then, okay, it comes time to actually draw. So perhaps I'll go bold with the ink. Right. And now it looks like I'm drawing. So I'll go bold with the ink, and then I go bold with the eyes. I complete the ears here. Add some shadow here. And suddenly it just seems that, well, actually, he was drawing without a sketch from the beginning, when in actuality, I did have an undersketch underneath. So the Pentel brush pen works very nicely for this. Other things that work very nicely is a fine liner. A fine liner can work nicely, not as nicely, I think, as a brush pen. A fine liner, so this one is also a Pentel fine liner, but also a Copic fine liner. Let's use a Copic fine liner for variety's sake. A fine liner, which is this type of very thin pen, you do need to be a bit more sure of what is it that you are going to draw, right? Because the line is not as, there's no gradation to the line. And I don't know why, I think the ink dried on this one, so not a great demo. But yeah, the Pentel, the lines are final. It's harder to do sketchy lines here. So you do need to be more confident on what is it that you're going to draw with a fine liner. So perhaps for the whole drawing without a sketch. A fine liner is a bit more of an advanced drawing material. So keep that in mind when choosing. But if you feel super confident with it, or you can make the lines work for you, if your style allows for that, yeah, just use a fine liner or a pen. You know, that's why I put here something that works for you. For me, it works best a brush. A fine liner might work perfectly for you. So you need to make that assessment for yourself, right? Sorry, just getting lost in the drawing. So you need to make that assessment for yourself of what is it that works for you, right? There's so much art material that you can choose to draw, essentially, that, yeah, I think just play around, find out what works for you. I forgot, there's one more thing that I would like to highlight, which is brushes that have a permanent ink. So just for explanation, for example, Pentel has these, they are with the black body. It's the non-permanent ink brush, and then there is the brushes that have permanent ink. Ink that is resistant to water. Because of the resistance to water, the ink itself is a little bit different. It's a bit more thick. It doesn't have a gradation like the regular brush. Let's call it the regular. It doesn't have a gradation. It's thick all the way. It's black. And I find that this one, for me, this one beats this one in ease of use. It's because the ink here, it's really about the ink and the brush tip. The ink on this one is a bit more thick, so it's harder to work with sometimes. You will notice that the ink here in the barrel, it's not that it clogs, but yeah, just a bit more thicker, more viscous, so it doesn't work as well for me as compared to this one. I mean, there's also the thick calligraphy pens. Maybe this one works for you. This is a Korean Mungyo calligraphy brush. So maybe this one works for you. Maybe for you, what works well is a super thick brush. Maybe what works for you is a super thin brush, like the Pentel Sign Artist brush pen. You know, a super thin line. It's all about finding the item that works for you, right? And then try to use it as well in a way that using the medium characteristics to your advantage, in a way that allows you to draw effectively without a pencil sketch. One of the last things that I would like to highlight here in terms of material is and this one also, this works perfectly for me. So I put this, so a traditional ink brush, I put this on the same level as this, right? So this is a traditional ink brush. This is my own brush. This is a custom-made brush. My recommendation for these, if you want to approach this style of drawing, is to have long body. For me, it's just comfortable, and also a long bristles, and no ferrule. I think it's called a ferrule in European brushes. I prefer without a ferrule. If you can find one without a ferrule, I'll try to put an image here of what a ferrule is. So yeah, you can see I have a couple of these custom-made brushes, and this one is already a bit used. And why is it that this one works for so well, and why I would recommend, if you can as well, to get a ink brush? The idea is that with an ink brush, right, you have much more control of the of the ink that you're using. So let me put here, so this is an ink stone. This is an ink stone. I'm gonna put some water here. And I'll do, there's one person also requested a lesson on how to use an ink brush. So I'll do a lesson on that as well, but this is just for the sake of explanation on, we're still on topic 2, finding the brush that works for you. So I'm grinding some ink here. Then I have my brush, right? I have my brush. So I go here. So I dip it in the ink after grinding the ink. And you will see that, and let me zoom out. You will see that the lines initially, they are black, right? The lines are black. But as the ink on the brush starts to go, because again, this is a traditional ink brush, so it doesn't have an ink barrel. As the ink starts to go, the ink becomes, depending on the color, so in this case we're using a black ink stone, depending on the color, it will start to go gray. And that's also something that you can use to your advantage in skipping the pencil. Because if the ink starts to go gray, so let me clean here. So I usually use a napkin, but I'm using here just for you guys to see. So I'm taking out the excess ink with water. I have a water container here. You can see that it's starting to become gray. Gray means that instead of committing to a full black line that is very definitive in the drawing, you can, so let me, this exercise here, you can first do essentially a sketch with gray. So for I would use it, I would let the ink dry even more, go from the brush, but for the sake of explanation, I'm essentially making a sketch just with a bit of ink that's left over in the brush. And then when I'm sure that this is what I want to go with, I recharge the ink on my brush, and then I do the final lines. This is another technique that you can employ. For your drawing as well. You can also build tones. That's something that you can also do with this style of ink brush, which you can also do with this. Technically, you can also dilute a brush pen that is non-water resistant in water as well to get a gray tone as well. That's something that you can also do. So we already have 2 tips. Number 1, don't skip the pencil sketch. And number 2, find the pen or the brush that works for you. I'm going to go to tip number 3. And I'm keeping the ink brush just because it's so fun. So tip number 3. Tip number 3, here, 3. You have your thumbnail, but it's time to draw, and the beginning matters. So this is my 3rd tip. The beginning matters. And it's for this one, it's all about finding that one spot in the drawing that you can draw successfully. So this is very important, that one thing that you can draw successfully. And then it's also that one thing that acts as an anchor point. What do I mean by anchor point? It's the point in the drawing where, as you are going, you are measuring every single thing that you are drawing against. It's the anchor point. What else can I say here? As you are drawing, you are essentially measuring back. So let's say I drew my anchor point here, and I'm drawing something else here. So what is it that I'm drawing here, right? I'm always measuring against this thing that I have here. Does it make sense in the context of the drawing? And this thing here, it's something that I try to draw well. Usually sometimes it's the center of the drawing. It's where I think that the eyes of the person will be drawn to when seeing the drawing. So this is what I mean by having an anchor point. So let's say let's demo this anchor point context, this anchor point topic. So I have a fresh page. Let's say that I start my drawing here. So I have this one, and I have another tip that I'll share afterwards. So I have here this is going to be my anchor point. So I'm drawing this. I'm being very careful. Of course, right now, for the purposes of the demo, I'm being a bit quicker. So this is my anchor point. So I'm drawing my anchor point here, being extra careful. This is where I start my drawing. Just making sure that I'm hitting the notes, I'm hitting the proportions. Just drawing. And of course my hand is shaking just a bit because I actually have my hands are a bit cold today. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm being a bit quicker than usual. I would be a bit more careful. And one thing that you can also do is, of course, instead of going full on with a more permanent black color, if you're using an ink brush, you can actually do it, gray, in a bit more grayscale. And it looks impressive as you start building your drawing, and it acts as a sketch. But for the purposes of the demo, I'm going full in with an ink tone, drawing my anchor point. Anchor point here. Is this an anchor? Being quick because this is a demo. So I have here my anchor point. So this would be, like I said before, the anchor point. I draw my first person, and for the purposes of the drawing, I'm considering the body, of course, but more than that, I'm considering the head as the anchor point. So this thing here, the head, is the anchor point. And I'll get into the boxy thing in the upcoming lessons. Okay, I have my anchor point right here. Anchor. Anchor. And everything else that I draw, I'm measuring against this anchor point. I'm making sure that it looks good in relation to the anchor point. This is very important. Oops, so I made a mistake here, but so I'm drawing the second character, and the second character, in terms of perspective and everything that the character is doing, it needs to be aligned somewhat with the first character. And then it's also how you tell the story that you're trying to tell, right? And you are constantly doing this. You are constantly, let's say you add a wall, right? You are constantly measuring up against the anchor point. Always, always, always. The exercise never stops. Always measuring against the anchor point. And you're adding your character slowly. You're building your character slowly up against the anchor point. The anchor point, for me, what I think works best is to start is a face. For you, it might be something completely different. And this is my other tip. This is tip number 4, technically tip 3.5. But for the anchor point, find something that you enjoy drawing. So for me, what works is, like I said before, the head. I know that it can differ from people. For me, it's the head. What I usually do is I either start with the hairline. So in this case, I think I started here with the hairline. So this is the start. Or I'll start with the line that makes up the forehead. So this line here, and then this is my start. So I started here with this line. This one, the line of the forehead. So for you, it could be something different. For you, it can be the eyes. Though my recommendation is not to start with the eyes, because the eyes are detail. The eyes are something that, the shape of the forehead, it's something that's much closer to the basic form of the box, which the head is a box, and we'll get to that in a bit. But the forehead is something that fits neatly here, close to the edges of the box. So I think that's why it works so nicely for me. But the eyes are a detail within the box. And even the mouth or the nose. So my recommendation is not to start with the eyes. Start with something that's a bit closer to the edges of the box. So maybe the cheeks, maybe the chin, maybe the cranium here. Ears, not as well. The ears are a detail, but if it works for you, why not, right? Again, I don't think there should be any rules to how you do this thing. You should do them the way that works for you, the way that you enjoy doing. That's the most important thing. It all goes back to my first pro tip, which is to have fun. So yeah, even though I put here 3, there's 3 and 3.5. And yeah, pretty much these are my main tips to drawing without a pencil. There is also no shame in if you start drawing without a pencil, right, and then you don't like it, as you are going, and I'm not liking the way this goes, to just start again, and eventually you will get to the vision that you had in mind. One more tip, I forgot, one more tip. So number 4, very important. Oh, the camera is losing the focus. So the camera was losing the focus there. Tip number 4, very important tip, is that draw something that you like. Why is this important? Because if it's something that you like, you will be more prone to remember when you're drawing. Let's say you really like to draw cars, right? Let's say cars are your passion. You will be able to draw cars much easier than perhaps a person. So you need to leverage your strengths, and of course be aware of your own shortcomings, perhaps in things that you could draw very well, things that you wish you could draw well, but you need to, I think, because time is limited, you need to focus on your strengths as an artist. So if you like cars, draw cars. If you like people, draw people. If you like buildings, draw buildings, and you build that memory by drawing something that you like. It's much easier. Let's say you like cars, and because you like cars, you know that I don't know cars, but you know that of course the doors need to be a certain way for the doors to open, and the windows need to be a certain way, and the way that the wheel is something like this, and you know very well the traction patterns that are in a wheel. You know them very well, you are accustomed to them, and you know all these gears inside and everything, the brakes, where they are. If you have a good idea of that, and if it's something that you like, of course it's going to be easier for you to draw it, because you have that memory of it, that effective memory of it. If you like to draw cakes, wherever it is, I think you should play to your own strengths. And you should also, because that passion will also reflect to your audience, same as I think, in how I draw people. That's what I like to draw, a slice of life. And I think that people come to my page because they know I like to draw that, they like the drawings, and I'm passionate about it. I don't know how to draw cars, but maybe that's you. I also, for example, I don't know how to draw very well animals. It's not something that I draw often, so I don't have a whole lot of visual memory on how to draw animals. Besides maybe the cat. Besides maybe the cat, because I have 2 cats, so I'm looking at the cats constantly. So I can try and draw them. But I think my worst nightmare is somebody asking me, can you draw a horse? Look, I'm never with horses or donkeys or elephants. It's very rare that I see those animals. And because of that, I don't necessarily know how to draw them from memory. I don't have that exposure, but maybe You work at a farm, maybe you really like drag animals. So because of that, it's easier for you to draw an animal, because maybe you really enjoy watching BBC, something like that, and seeing elephants and all that, and of course you know that the elephant does this and does that, and so I'm just drawing an exaggerated cartoon of an elephant, but you know the skull of an elephant, you just know how things are, and the texture of the skin. But I'm not that type of person that knows how to draw an animal out of memory. So draw something that you like. That's tip number 4. Very important. Very important. Draw something that you like, something that you enjoy doing. You will see results much quicker. And of course, if there's something that you would like to learn how to draw, but you don't know, then if you have the time, then you start learning how to do it. And yeah, you build from there. You build a visual memory from there. So those are my tips for how to draw without a pencil. I hope these are useful. Of course, I might know some additional tips that I would love to share, but I still need to think about those. Those come to me, of course, when I'm actually doing the drawing. And for the video today, I really didn't want to focus on the basics like, oh, of course you need to practice. Well, of course you need to practice, right? That goes without saying. I wanted to provide some information that was a bit more applicable, something a bit more useful than just, well, go practice drawing what you like. That's also very important. You should also do that as well. But yeah, I hope you guys like this part. I'm planning next to do some anatomy lessons, which should be fun, but we will talk about construction first of the human body, and then we'll talk about anatomy proper, but we'll not talk anatomy in a way that you need to memorize every single thing. That's also not how I roll. That's not how I do things. But yeah, hope you guys liked it. Hope you guys appreciated this part of the video, and stay tuned for the next one.